Hi, so this is a lesson on essay intros. So this is an inverted triangle. It's often sort of like the visual people talk about in terms of like how your intro should be constructed, right? So it starts off broad and then it narrows down to the specifics of your essay, right? Your thesis statement. So the first sentence or two is the hook. Um, and hook might be a familiar term. I think that's often how people talk about it in high school. Lead is a more journalistic term, but it's that first sentence, right? It's a sentence version of clickbait. It's thought provoking and it piques interest. Um, so in between the hook and the thesis statement is a bridge, and it leads the reader to the thesis statement, and it's a smooth transition from the hook to the thesis. And the thesis statement is one sentence that states the main idea of the essay. It really establishes what you're going to be talking about as a writer, and it helps me as a reader. It helps my expectations of a reader, so I know what you'll be talking about, a general idea of what you'll be talking about. So I want to use the 2016 NBA Finals, the Cavs versus Warriors, as a way to think about that introduction. Excuse me. So here we see a screenshot from ESPN. These were the predictions. By far, the staff thought that the Warriors were going to win. You see only like 3 people on this page thought the Cavs were going to win. And guess who was right, right? So, these are players from the Cavs, LeBron James, right? You see the emotion, right? They worked so hard to obtain the championship. So here's an opening intro, and it's adapted from this news article. Cleveland, this is for you, LeBron James bellowed. James and his relentless, never count them out Cavaliers pulled off an improbable NBA Finals comeback, and Cleveland is title town again at long last. James single handedly and heroically carried the Cavs to their first championship in franchise history. So here, the hook, right? The quote, Cleveland, this is for you, right? The quote attempting to draw the reader in, and then we see the bridge, right? Referencing the game, right, and how impactful it was. And then the thesis statement, James single-handedly and heroically carried the Cavs to their first championship in franchise history. So here, the expectation that is set is that the essay will discuss sort of the athletic decisions that James made that propelled the Cavs to win this final game, right? And thus the championship. So that is the expectation established by this thesis statement. So I want to talk about the hook, but first, some things that I recommend you don't do. So, no, in a world like openings, this is when you're watching a movie or you're at the movies, and in the movie trailer, there's that voiceover that says, in a world, right? So, no, in a world like openings. An example is everyone everywhere has had an experience that has changed them forever. Cats are good companions. Okay. Often I see students start off their essays in these very general ways that really don't have a lot of value to their essays because it's so general, it's so vague, and I really just see it as a way for you to begin writing. But certainly, you can write it, just delete it because you don't need it. Something I also encourage you not to do is don't start off your essays with a question. Okay. Have you ever had an experience that changed you forever? Cats are good companions, right? So, again, like, so general, non specific, it's not really saying much, right? Secondly, be careful when you use a statistic or a famous quote. Don't just quote Einstein. Make sure it isn't a cliche. So often I see this: a wise person once said, "Loneliness is the human condition." Too general. It's just it again. It just looks like a way to begin the essay, but really it doesn't add value to your writing. So better ways to start. Vivid descriptions. The moment you leave your apartment in New York, you are surrounded. Your arm touches the arm of the grandmother on the A train. You dodge corporate workers speed walking to their high rises. You avoid eye contact with sidewalk hecklers asking for money. But New York can still often feel like a table for one, right? So, as New Yorkers, we've all we can relate to this feeling, right? Of just the sort of energy that New York is when you are thrusted into it. And you're surrounded by people. Like, you don't, your personal space is very small in New York. But at the same time, you often, there is a singular experience that one can have in New York. But the vivid descriptions of being on the train, of being on the sidewalk, and things like that, right? Those are, you can paint a scene using sensory details, smell, sight, right? Touch, sound. You can use metaphor or simile to start. Adulthood often feels like variations of figuring out who you can sit next to in the lunchroom. Again, this metaphor, right? And this is a metaphor that we all have at least witnessed in a high school movie, right? The new kid walks in, they don't know where to sit, with the popular kids, with the nerds, the goths, whatever, right? So like, this metaphor is familiar, and it's trying to relate that experience to what it might feel like sometimes as an adult, right? Fight in words, and this is the idea of being intentionally controversial and provocative, right? So here, loneliness is a choice. Short sentence, but really kind of like asserting an opinion that not a lot of people would share. And again, it's being intentionally provocative. You can use humor. I encourage it. I love seeing humor in student essays. I couldn't even think of something funny, but I've had students who use it. It was really such a pleasure to read. So if you are a funny person, like, try to bring that out in your essays. So in review, you can use vivid descriptions, you can use metaphor and simile, you can be provocative, and you can use humor. So those are some ways you can begin your essays. So the bridge is a way to transition again between the hook and the thesis statement, right? It helps your reader walk over to the specifics of your point of view. So the bridge is on topic, and you need a bridge because often it can feel too clunky, right? So here's an example of this is the hook and this is the thesis statement. As recently as 50 years ago, millions of people died of smallpox every year. Worldwide vaccination programs must be organized to eliminate malaria, measles, and hepatitis B. So right now it's too far of a leap. Like, a reader can see how they relate, but what exactly is the relationship? So here is the bridge. However, a global program eradicated this disease in 1980. So, the opening talks about the impact of smallpox, right? And then also how the smallpox vaccine, pretty much eliminated the disease in 1980. And then it leads to the case, the claim that the writer is making, that a worldwide vaccination program must be organized so it can eliminate these three um, lethal diseases in the world. So in a literary bridge, that was a standard bridge. In a literary bridge, it states the name of the work and the author. Um, uh, when you're using a literary bridge, you don't want to summarize the whole plot, but you do want to include key information that connects the hook to the thesis. So some references to the plot, but you don't want to give like from start to finish what happens in the story. So here, the hook is speak English or go back to your country. In today's United States, at any given moment, immigrants are told they don't belong here. And the bridge is, but 42.8 million Americans speak Spanish at home. In There Is No Single Voice in America, Elaine Castillo asserts that English is not the language of the United States. Is not the language of the United States. And the thesis statement is Castillo makes the case that any language a person speaks and writes in the United States is American. Excuse me. So again, here is a literary bridge. It names the title of the work and the author. Okay, and then here the thesis establishes that makes the case for how to analyze the essay, which is Castillo really talking how the diversity of languages spoken in America is American. Okay, so the thesis statement is opinionated, it's original, and it's deep. So ask yourself, after you write your thesis statement, would I want to read this essay? Okay. Would this be apparent to most people? You don't want to write an essay that's based on the obvious, okay? Because people already believe that. And you want to make sure that it does challenge you as a critical thinker and as a writer. So here I'm giving you a sentence sum, and there are many that you can see. I have many lessons on this on Blackboard, but this one is basic. So in title of work, author illustrates your opinion. So in How to Tame a Wild Tongue, Loria Anzaldúa, and I know this is kind of like discussed in the bridge. Here, you can modify this by saying Anzaldúa argues for a rebellion against the continued colonialization of language. Here, Anzaldúa subverts the expectation of an academic essay by employing stylized language, personal narrative, and heightened imagery. Anzaldúa exposes the flaws and traumas of a white supremacist-centered classroom. Okay, so again, the author's name, and then a verb, a rhetorically active verb, and then what the writer is trying to do.